Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back, way back, to a time when the air was thick with the scent of lotus blossoms and baking bread, but also, quite possibly, with the persistent hacking of a chesty cough. Imagine yourself standing on the banks of the ancient Nile, the sun a fierce disk in the sky, and suddenly, you feel that telltale tickle in your throat. You'd instinctively reach for a lozenge, maybe some cough syrup, but in ancient Egypt, your options were, well, let's just say a little more organic. You probably wouldn't survive this for very long, at least not without some serious discomfort, because coughs, even then, were no laughing matter. They were a daily reality, a common complaint that could escalate from a mere annoyance to something far more sinister without the marvels of modern medicine. You're not just going to shrug it off. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now, down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the bustling marketplace of Memphis, circa 1500 BCE. The air is warm, dusty, and vibrant with the sounds of merchants hawking their wares, the lowing of cattle, and the distant clatter of stone cutting. You can almost feel the dry heat on your skin, the grip beneath your sandals. Suddenly, a dry cough erupts from a bystander, and you wince in sympathy. It's a familiar sound, one that echoes through the papyrus scrolls of medical texts from millennia past. Ancient Egyptians, for all their monumental achievements in architecture and astronomy, were still very much human, susceptible to the same sneezes, sniffles, and indeed, stubborn coughs that plague us today. They faced a litany of ailments, many of which would send shivers down your spine if you experienced them without the benefit of a modern emergency room. From parasitic infections carried by the very waters that sustained them, to mysterious fevers, and the ever-present threat of respiratory illnesses exacerbated by dusty living conditions, life was a delicate balance. Historians still argue whether some of the descriptions in the Ebers Papyrus, one of the most comprehensive ancient medical texts, refer to specific viral or bacterial infections as we understand them today, or if they were broader symptomatic descriptions. What we do know is that they categorized and attempted to treat a wide array of afflictions. You might see a child with inflamed eyes, a common affliction due to the flies and dust. Perhaps an older man hobbles by, complaining of aches in his joints, a testament to the hard labor demanded by their agricultural society. And everywhere, it seems, someone is clearing their throat, a gentle reminder that even the most advanced ancient civilization couldn't escape the common cold, or worse. The Egyptians, however, were not simply passive victims of their environment. They actively sought remedies, developed sophisticated, for their time, diagnostic methods, and established a medical tradition that would influence the Western world for centuries. You can almost hear the soft rustle of linen as a physician consults his scrolls, his brow furrowed in concentration. It makes you wonder, if you had a hacking cough in ancient Egypt, what precisely would be prescribed? And would it involve something you'd actually want to swallow? We're about to find out, slowly and gently. As you wander through the sun-drenched streets, you begin to notice the subtle ways the mighty Nile shaped every aspect of ancient Egyptian life, including their health. This wasn't just a river, it was the lifeblood, the giver of all good things, and, unfortunately, a potential source of many not-so-good things, especially if you had a weak chest. The annual inundation, while crucial for fertile fields, also left behind stagnant pools when the waters receded. Imagine the buzzing of mosquitoes, thick as a cloud, carrying who knows what tiny, invisible threats. You'd be swatting them away constantly, but some would inevitably get through, depositing their unwelcome cargo. The sheer humidity, especially after the flood, could also be a breeding ground for respiratory issues. Your modern lungs, accustomed to air conditioning and regulated temperatures, would probably feel heavy and tight in that environment. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of certain lung diseases, evidenced by skeletal remains showing signs of tuberculosis, was directly linked to the dampness of the Nile Valley or other environmental factors. It's a chicken and egg kind of puzzle, but one thing is clear, the air quality wasn't always what you'd call crisp mountain air. Think about it. Sand, dust, smoke from cooking fires, and the general effluvia of a densely populated ancient city. It wasn't exactly a sterile environment. You might even find yourself wishing for a face mask, though they hadn't quite invented those yet. Beyond the dampness, the very diet of the Egyptians, rich in grains and sometimes lacking in certain vitamins if not properly varied, could influence their susceptibility to illness. A mainstream historical fact is that their diet heavily relied on bread and beer, staple foods derived from barley and emmer wheat. While nutritious in their own right, a diet too narrow could leave vulnerabilities. For instance, a deficiency in vitamin A, common in many ancient agricultural societies, can weaken the immune system, making one more prone to respiratory infections. It's like trying to fight off a cold when all you've eaten for a week is toast. Not exactly a recipe for success, is it? Then there's the delightful presence of various parasites. The Nile was home to schistosomiasis, a parasitic worm that could enter the body through contaminated water. While primarily affecting the urinary tract and intestines, chronic parasitic infections could indirectly weaken the body's overall immune response, leaving you more vulnerable to that persistent cough. You might be innocently bathing in the river, or just drawing water for your daily needs, completely unaware of the microscopic invaders lurking beneath the surface. Talk about a hidden menace. It makes you appreciate your filtered tap water, doesn't it? The Egyptians, in their wisdom, knew to boil water for certain applications, but a widespread understanding of germ theory was still millennia away. So, while the Nile provided sustenance and life, it also presented a constant health challenge, one that necessitated their rather ingenious, if sometimes peculiar, approaches to medicine. So, you've got that nagging tickle, perhaps a full-blown hacking fit, making you quite uncomfortable in your ancient Egyptian dwelling. What kind of cough is it, exactly, in the eyes of a priest-physician? Unlike our modern medical charts with their endless subtypes of bronchitis, pertussis, or viral pneumonia, the Egyptians had a more descriptive and, frankly, more poetic approach. You wouldn't hear terms like acute or chronic in the sense we use them. Instead, they focused on the character of the cough and its accompanying symptoms, which makes sense when you consider their understanding of the body. A mainstream historical fact is that ancient Egyptian medical papyri often categorized illnesses by their presenting symptoms rather than their underlying causes, which were largely unknown. For a cough, you might hear it described as a cough of the breath, implying difficulty breathing alongside the cough, perhaps suggesting something akin to asthma or a severe chest infection. Or perhaps a cough of the stomach, which might sound odd to us, but could refer to gastrointestinal upset accompanying the cough, or even reflux that irritates the throat. Imagine trying to explain your heartburn-induced cough to someone who thinks your stomach is literally coughing. It's certainly a different way of looking at things. A quirky tidbit from the Ebers Papyrus describes a cough of the throat, which sounds simple enough, but could encompass anything from a common cold to a serious pharyngeal infection. They were keenly observant of the visible symptoms. You might be asked if your cough produces phlegm, and if so, its color and consistency, much like a modern doctor would inquire. But they'd also consider if it was accompanied by a fever, difficulty swallowing, or a general malaise that suggested a deeper imbalance within your body's mysterious channels. Historians still argue whether their concept of channels or metu in the body, which carried air, water, blood, and even evil spirits, is a precursor to our circulatory and nervous systems, or simply a metaphorical understanding of bodily functions. Either way, a cough was often seen as an obstruction or irritation within these vital pathways. They also believed that some coughs were caused by external forces, perhaps evil spirits or the malevolent gaze of an envious neighbor. So, while you might be given a herbal concoction, you might also find yourself participating in a ritualistic cleansing or wearing an amulet to ward off unseen mischief. Imagine trying to convince your general practitioner today that your flu is actually caused by your grumpy next-door neighbor's bad vibes. You'd probably get a referral to a very different kind of specialist. The Egyptians, however, saw no contradiction between the physical and the spiritual in healing. For them, a cough wasn't just a physiological malfunction. It was an indication that something, seen or unseen, was out of alignment. So, depending on the nature of your hack, the prescribed remedy could range from a simple herbal brew to a complex ritual involving incantations and offerings. It really highlights how holistic, in a peculiar way, their medical approach truly was. With your chest now rumbling like the distant sound of a chariot, you're finally brought to the local healer, who, after a careful examination and perhaps a few skeptical glances at your rather odd modern clothing, begins to prepare a remedy. This is where the ancient Egyptian herbal pharmacy truly shines, or perhaps gently glistens. A mainstream historical fact is that the Egyptians possessed an extensive knowledge of medicinal plants, cataloging them meticulously in papyri like the Ebers Papyrus and the Edwin Smith Papyrus. You'd be amazed by the sheer variety they cultivated or gathered from the fertile Nile Valley and surrounding deserts. Imagine yourself in a dimly lit chamber, perhaps the back room of a temple or the home of a respected physician. The air is thick with the earthy scent of dried herbs and the faint aroma of incense. You see bundles of papyrus, not just for writing, but sometimes used for its anti-inflammatory properties, perhaps brewed into a tea. There's acacia, the gum of which was often mixed with other ingredients to create soothing lozenges or poultices. You might even spot a bowl of onion or garlic, both known for their pungent aroma and, as they believed, their potent medicinal qualities. While we might reach for a modern cold and flu tablet, they were reaching for what grew directly from the earth around them. A quirky tidbit is the use of willow bark, which, centuries later, would be recognized as containing salicylates, the active ingredient in aspirin. So, while they didn't understand the molecular biology, they intuitively grasped its pain-relieving and fever-reducing properties. You might find yourself being offered a bitter brew, perhaps with a grimace, knowing that something akin to nature's aspirin is at play. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians understood the specific chemical properties of these plants, or if their knowledge was purely empirical, passed down through generations of trial and error. Was it accidental genius, or did they possess a deeper, lost understanding of phytochemistry? You'd also notice the use of date fruit, not just as a sweet treat, but often crushed and mixed with other remedies to make them more palatable or to act as a binding agent. Imagine a sort of ancient, less sugary, cough drop. And then there's morina oil, derived from the seeds of the morina tree, which was used for a variety of ailments, including respiratory issues. It's thought to have anti-inflammatory and antiseptic properties, so you might feel a soothing sensation as it goes down. The preparation of these remedies was often an elaborate affair, involving grinding ingredients with pestle and mortar, simmering them in clay pots, and carefully measuring quantities, sometimes by spoonfuls, sometimes by the weight of a tiny pebble. It required patience, precision, and a deep respect for the power of nature. You can almost hear the gentle grinding of herbs, a rhythmic, calming sound in the quiet chamber. Now let's talk about the unsung hero of many ancient Egyptian remedies, the sticky, golden elixir that often found its way into their cough cures: honey. If you were experiencing a particularly nasty cough, your ancient physician would almost certainly reach for this sweet, natural wonder. A mainstream historical fact is that honey was incredibly prized in ancient Egypt, not just as a foodstuff, but as a potent medicine, a preservative, and even as an offering to the gods. They understood its value intuitively, long before modern science dissected its antimicrobial properties. Imagine a large, earthenware jar, perhaps decorated with hieroglyphs of bees, filled with rich, dark honey. The air in the healing chamber sweetens as the physician scoops out a viscous glob. You can almost feel its thick, soothing consistency, coating your irritated throat even before it touches your tongue. They used honey for everything from wound dressing to digestive issues, but its role in respiratory ailments was paramount. Its natural stickiness would have provided immediate relief, forming a protective barrier over inflamed tissues in your throat. Think of it as the original cough syrup, only far more delicious and, arguably, more natural than anything you'd find on a modern pharmacy shelf. A quirky tidbit is that the Egyptians believed honey possessed magical properties beyond its medicinal benefits. It was considered a symbol of purity and divine favor, perhaps because of the meticulous work of the bees. Some texts even suggest it was thought to absorb evil humors from the body. So, not only would you be taking a natural antiseptic, but you'd also be ingesting a little bit of ancient Egyptian magic, hoping it would chase away whatever mischievous spirit was causing your cough. It's certainly a more comforting thought than just a spoonful of sticky sweetness, isn't it? Historians still argue whether the efficacy of some ancient honey-based remedies was due purely to the honey itself, or if the other ingredients mixed with it also played a significant role, or even if the placebo effect was a major factor. Regardless, its consistent presence in countless recipes speaks volumes about their faith in its healing power. You might find your honey mixed with powdered herbs, perhaps a bit of frankincense for its perceived anti-inflammatory properties, or even a touch of carob for flavor and additional soothing. The consistency would have been thick and syrupy, designed to cling to the back of your throat, providing prolonged relief. It truly highlights their deep connection to natural resources and their empirical understanding of their healing potential. You'd probably feel a gentle warmth spreading through your chest as the sweet concoction slides down, a tiny moment of comfort in a world without readily available lozenges. Beyond the soothing sweetness of honey, ancient Egyptian remedies for that persistent cough sometimes ventured into territory that might make your modern stomach churn a little. Yes, we're talking about ingredients derived from animals. While you might reach for a chicken noodle soup, they sometimes reached for, well, let's just say, less appetizing parts of the animal kingdom. A mainstream historical fact is that animal products, from fats and blood to more exotic components, were regularly incorporated into their pharmacopoeia, often believed to transfer the animal's strength or essence to the ailing human. Imagine the physician's assistant bringing out a small, stopper jar. You might brace yourself, wondering what unusual concoction is about to be presented. One quirky tidbit from the medical papyri indicates the use of lizard's blood or bat's blood in some remedies, believed to have properties that could ward off illness or strengthen the body. Now, don't worry, they probably weren't asking you to drink a whole goblet of it, but it might have been mixed into a paste or a more palatable brew. The thought of it, even as a tiny ingredient, is enough to make you cough for entirely different reasons. Historians still argue whether the inclusion of such ingredients was based on any empirical observation of their effects, or if it was purely symbolic or magical, intended to harness a primal power. Was it a genuine attempt at medicine, or merely a desperate plea to the universe? Then there's the more common, though still rather odd, use of animal fats. You might find yourself being given a salve or ointment made from goose fat or ox fat, rubbed onto your chest to ease congestion. The idea was that the warmth and consistency of the fat would help to break up the phlegm and soothe inflamed airways. While we might find this a little primitive, remember that Vicks VapoRub, a modern staple, also relies on a greasy base to deliver its active ingredients. So, perhaps they weren't entirely off the mark, even if their choice of animal wasn't quite what we're used to. You can almost feel the thick, greasy residue on your skin, a slightly unsettling but perhaps comforting warmth spreading across your chest. And sometimes, things got even more peculiar. Think about the potential use of excrement. Yes, you heard that right. While not explicitly for coughs in all instances, some ancient remedies across cultures, including potentially in Egypt, did incorporate animal dung, often due to beliefs about its purifying or heating properties. Rest assured, if this was prescribed for your cough, it would have been in highly specific, diluted, and hopefully sterilized forms. You'd probably just close your eyes and gulp it down, praying it worked. It certainly puts modern medicine's pleasantries into perspective, doesn't it? It's a stark reminder that medicine, throughout history, has always been a blend of practical knowledge, cultural beliefs, and sometimes a leap of faith. As you ponder the curious use of animal byproducts, remember that for the ancient Egyptians, healing wasn't always just about tangible substances. It was often deeply intertwined with the intangible world of magic, rituals, and the divine. For a stubborn cough, particularly one that seemed to defy all herbal and animal-based remedies, your physician might very well turn to the power of words, specifically magical incantations. A mainstream historical fact is that magic and medicine were not separate disciplines in ancient Egypt. Priests were often also physicians, and medical texts frequently contained spells and charms alongside prescriptions. Imagine the atmosphere shifting in the healing chamber. The practical mixing of herbs gives way to a more hushed, reverent tone. The physician might light incense, the sweet, smoky tendrils curling upwards, perhaps to purify the air or to invite benevolent deities. You might be asked to participate, to repeat certain phrases, or simply to remain still and listen intently as the words are spoken over you. These weren't just poetic verses. They were believed to be potent forces, capable of expelling illness or invoking protective powers. Historians still argue whether the psychological effect of these rituals, a form of very early placebo effect, was recognized by the Egyptians, or if they genuinely believed in the literal power of the spoken word to alter physical reality. Was it a comfort mechanism, or a genuine attempt to control the unseen? A quirky tidbit is that some incantations were addressed directly to the illness itself, personifying the cough as a malevolent entity that needed to be persuaded or commanded to leave your body. You might hear phrases like, "Go forth, cough, for you are not welcome here," or "May the gods protect this vessel from your grasp." It's a bit like politely asking your sickness to pack its bags, only with far more solemnity and a healthy dose of divine authority. You might even find yourself stifling a chuckle at the thought of a cough being told off by a priest, but in that moment, enveloped in the flickering lamplight and the sonorous tones, you'd likely take it quite seriously. The incantations often invoked the names of powerful gods and goddesses associated with healing, such as Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of medicine and war, or Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. You might feel a strange mix of skepticism and hope as the ancient words wash over you, knowing that this is not just a medical treatment, but a spiritual one. The belief was that the gods, if properly petitioned, could intervene and restore balance to your afflicted body. It was a comprehensive approach, addressing not just the physical symptoms, but also the perceived spiritual or magical causes of the illness. It speaks to a worldview where the visible and invisible realms were constantly intersecting, and where even a mundane cough could be a cosmic event requiring divine intervention. After the ethereal calm of incantations, you're now more attuned to the very practical side of ancient Egyptian healing. The individuals who dispensed these remedies. These weren't just random folks with a good herb collection. They were specialized practitioners, often highly respected within their communities. A mainstream historical fact is that ancient Egypt boasted a sophisticated medical system with various types of healers, some even specializing in particular parts of the body. You wouldn't just see a general practitioner. You might consult a physician of the head, or, pertinent to our cough, a physician of the chest. Imagine meeting one such individual. They might be a priest-physician, often associated with a temple, carrying a certain gravitas and spiritual authority. Their knowledge would be derived from ancient texts and generations of accumulated wisdom. Or perhaps you'd visit a SWNW, a general physician who might have a small clinic attached to their home. They would be well-versed in herbal remedies, minor surgical procedures, and diagnostic techniques. You'd notice their calm demeanor, their patient hands, and the way they observe your every movement, listening to your cough with a trained ear. A quirky tidbit is the existence of pastry cooks, who were also, apparently, healers. It's thought they might have been responsible for preparing medicated foods or sweet pastes, making bitter medicines more palatable. So, your cough remedy might have come from someone who could whip up a batch of delicious date cakes just as easily as a potent herbal poultice. Historians still argue whether these pastry cooks were fully recognized medical practitioners or more akin to apothecaries, focusing solely on the preparation and dispensing of treatments. It certainly adds a layer of unexpected charm to the medical profession of the time, doesn't it? Imagine your doctor also being an excellent baker. The training of these healers was rigorous and often involved apprenticeships. Young men, and sometimes women, would learn from experienced practitioners, poring over medical papyri and observing treatments. They would learn not just about specific remedies, but also about anatomy, often gained from mummification practices, though surprisingly limited in its application to live surgery, diagnosis, and the delicate balance between the physical and spiritual realms. You'd sense their dedication, their genuine desire to alleviate suffering, even if their methods sometimes seem curious to our modern eyes. They were the custodians of health in a world without widespread antibiotics or advanced imaging, relying on keen observation, empirical knowledge, and a healthy dose of faith. You might feel a flicker of trust, despite the unusual nature of some of their potential prescriptions, knowing that these individuals were the best hope for relief in their era. With your ancient Egyptian physician now attending to you, the next crucial step is diagnosis. How exactly did they figure out why you were coughing? While they didn't have stethoscopes or x-rays, their diagnostic methods were surprisingly astute, relying heavily on observation and questioning. A mainstream historical fact is that Egyptian physicians were keen observers of symptoms, paying close attention to visual cues, the patient's general demeanor, and the characteristics of their complaints. Imagine the physician leaning closer, their gaze steady and discerning. They wouldn't just hear your cough, they'd listen to it, noting if it was dry and hacking or wet and productive. You might be asked to describe when the cough started, if it was worse at certain times of day, or if anything seemed to make it better or worse. They'd likely feel your forehead for fever, check your pulse, and perhaps even examine your throat and tongue. It's a surprisingly familiar scene, isn't it, despite the millennia separating us? A quirky tidbit is that some diagnostic methods involved examining excreta. For certain ailments, they might have looked at your urine or stools for clues, believing these could reveal imbalances within the body. While it sounds a bit unappealing, it was a practical way to gather information before the advent of internal imaging. Historians still argue whether their understanding of internal anatomy, derived primarily from mummification rather than dissection of live bodies, was sufficiently detailed to link specific symptoms to precise internal organs. Did they truly understand the lungs, or were they just observing external manifestations of internal distress? Beyond the physical, the physician would also consider your lifestyle and recent activities. Had you been near the dusty threshing floors? Had you eaten something unusual? They understood the connection between environment and health, even if their concept of germs was non-existent. They might also inquire about any bad dreams or recent misfortunes, as illness could also be attributed to divine displeasure or magical interference, linking back to those incantations we discussed. So, your diagnosis wasn't just a medical assessment. It was a holistic evaluation of your physical, environmental, and spiritual state. You might feel a sense of vulnerability as they scrutinize you, knowing that your health, in this ancient world, is a fragile thing. But you'd also sense a quiet confidence in their approach, a deep-seated belief in their ability to interpret the body's signals and propose a course of action. It truly highlights the blend of empirical observation and spiritual belief that characterized ancient Egyptian medicine, where every cough was not just a symptom, but a story waiting to be told. Now, with a diagnosis in hand, you might wonder if ancient Egyptian physicians ever went beyond poultices and potions for a cough. Could they have resorted to something more invasive? While you might envision a modern surgeon with gleaming scalpels, the reality for a cough was far less dramatic, if not entirely non-existent. A mainstream historical fact is that while ancient Egyptians performed impressive surgeries, particularly on external injuries and fractures, invasive procedures for internal ailments like coughs were exceedingly rare, if not entirely absent. Their understanding of internal anatomy, while better than some contemporary cultures due to mummification, didn't extend to complex internal interventions. Imagine the physician shaking their head, a gentle refusal. No, you wouldn't be going under the knife for your cough. The risks of infection were far too high, and their instruments, while sharp, were not designed for delicate internal work. You'd probably breathe a sigh of relief at that. Their focus was almost exclusively on external applications, like setting broken bones or treating superficial wounds. Any cough treatment would involve remedies that you could ingest, inhale, or apply topically to your chest. A quirky tidbit, however, is that some procedures did involve minor incisions, but typically for abscesses or boils, not for respiratory conditions. There's no evidence of anything resembling a tracheotomy or lung surgery for a cough. Historians still argue whether their surgical capabilities, impressive as they were for trauma, could have been quietly extended to more internal issues if specific conditions arose. It's a fascinating what-if question. If they could successfully mend a fractured skull, why not drain a severe lung infection? The answer likely lies in the understanding of infection and the sheer impossibility of operating on a live, breathing, and likely squirming patient without modern anesthesia. You just have to hold your breath and hope the herbs did their work. So, for your persistent cough, rest assured, no sharp objects would be coming near your windpipe. The interventions would remain gentle, focused on soothing and clearing the airways through non-surgical means. It truly highlights the boundaries of their medical knowledge and technology, ingenious within their limits, but respectful of the ultimate mysteries of the internal human body. You'd be grateful for the absence of medieval-looking instruments and instead, patiently await the next herbal concoction. Since invasive surgery was, thankfully, off the table for your ancient Egyptian cough, the focus would naturally shift to prevention. After all, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, even in a world without modern scales. The Egyptians were remarkably proactive in trying to maintain health, understanding that certain daily practices could ward off illness. A mainstream historical fact is that hygiene played a significant role in ancient Egyptian daily life, from regular bathing to meticulous grooming. Imagine your daily routine in ancient Egypt. You'd likely start your day by heading to the Nile or a nearby canal for a wash. While not always pristine, these daily ablutions were a fundamental part of their culture, far beyond what many other ancient societies practiced. You wouldn't just wash your face. You'd cleanse your entire body, using natron, a natural salt, as a kind of soap. This wasn't just about looking good. It was about removing dust, dirt, and potentially harmful microbes from your skin. You can almost feel the cool water on your skin, a refreshing start to a hot day. A quirky tidbit is the extensive use of perfumes and oils, not just for fragrance, but also for their perceived protective qualities. These weren't just for luxury. Some were believed to repel insects, soothe skin irritations, and perhaps even offer a very mild antiseptic effect. So, while you might think of them as merely cosmetic, they actually served a dual purpose in promoting health and well-being. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians fully understood the link between cleanliness and disease prevention, or if their practices were more ritualistic and aesthetically driven, with health benefits being a happy byproduct. Did they wash to avoid sickness, or just to smell divine? Beyond personal hygiene, their living environments also had preventative measures. Homes were often built with small windows or vents to encourage air circulation while minimizing dust ingress. Food storage, while not perfect, involved methods like salting and drying to prevent spoilage, which could lead to foodborne illnesses that might indirectly weaken the body and make you susceptible to coughs. You'd be careful about what you ate and where it came from, much like you would today. And consider the sheer brilliance of their diet, rich in nutrient-dense foods like figs, dates, and various vegetables, which provided essential vitamins and minerals to bolster the immune system. Even if they didn't understand vitamins, they understood the benefits of a varied diet. So, while you couldn't escape every cough, your daily life in ancient Egypt would involve many subtle, yet effective, practices designed to keep you healthy and minimize your chances of succumbing to common ailments. You might think that all ancient Egyptian remedies were available to everyone, but just like today, status often dictated access to the finest treatments. If you happened to be part of the pharaoh's inner circle, or perhaps even the pharaoh themselves, your cough remedies might have been a bit more opulent. A mainstream historical fact is that the pharaoh and the elite class had access to the best physicians, the rarest ingredients, and the most elaborate treatments, often supported by the vast resources of the royal treasury. Imagine the grand halls of the palace, perhaps even a dedicated medical wing, where the air is constantly purified with exotic incenses and the finest oils. Your physician, attending to the pharaoh's cough, would have no shortage of resources. They wouldn't just use common herbs. They'd have access to rare imports from distant lands, brought along ancient trade routes. Think of spices from Punt or resins from Lebanon, all believed to possess potent healing properties and far too expensive for the common person. You might hear tales of remedies involving powdered gemstones or tiny fragments of rare metals, though their actual medicinal value would be highly dubious. A quirky tidbit is the use of what might be termed royal honey, specifically collected from bees in the royal gardens or from certain highly prized regions. This wasn't just any honey. It was the best honey, perhaps imbued with a particular sanctity due to its origin. Historians still argue whether some of these elite treatments were truly more effective or if their perceived superiority was primarily due to their rarity and the psychological comfort of receiving the best. Was it the gold leaf in the remedy that healed, or merely the belief that such a valuable ingredient must heal? The pharaoh's daily regimen for prevention would also be far more meticulous. You wouldn't just have access to daily baths. You'd have a retinue of servants ensuring your environment was meticulously clean, your food carefully prepared, and your personal space protected from all potential contaminants. You'd have a specialized diet, tailored to your perceived needs, and constant vigilance against any sign of illness. It's a stark contrast to the common person's struggle against dust and parasites, isn't it? The pharaoh's health was paramount, not just for their personal well-being, but for the stability of the entire kingdom, as they were seen as a divine link to the gods. So, while your common cough might get a simple herbal brew, the pharaoh's cough would be a matter of national concern, addressed with the full might of Egypt's medical and mystical resources. As you slowly sip your ancient Egyptian remedy for that lingering cough, you might wonder if all the ingredients were purely local. In fact, ancient Egypt, far from being isolated, was a hub of trade, and this exchange of goods also meant an exchange of ideas, and importantly, exotic remedies. A mainstream historical fact is that Egyptian medicine, while highly developed internally, also absorbed influences and imported ingredients from neighboring cultures, particularly through established trade routes like the Silk Roads. Though primarily for silk, other goods traveled too, and maritime routes across the Mediterranean and Red Seas. Imagine caravans arriving from the east, laden not just with spices and precious stones, but also with bundles of dried herbs and resins unknown in the Nile Valley. You might find frankincense and myrrh, imported from the Arabian Peninsula or regions of East Africa, prized not only for their use in religious rituals and perfumes, but also for their perceived medicinal properties. Frankincense, with its distinct earthy aroma, was believed to have anti-inflammatory and antiseptic qualities, making it a valuable addition to remedies for respiratory issues. You can almost smell the exotic, pungent aroma as it's added to your concoction, a scent from a distant land promising relief. A quirky tidbit is the potential, though less documented, influence from sub-Saharan Africa, bringing unique botanicals and healing practices. While direct evidence in medical papyri is scarce, the constant interaction and trade along the Nile suggest a flow of knowledge. Historians still argue whether the medical traditions of the Levant or Mesopotamia significantly influenced Egyptian practices, or if the flow was primarily one way, with Egypt being the more dominant medical authority. It's a complex tapestry of ancient knowledge exchange, isn't it? So, your cough remedy might contain not just ingredients grown in Egyptian soil, but also potent herbs and resins that traveled hundreds, if not thousands, of miles to reach the physician's hands. This cross-cultural pollination of medical knowledge highlights the interconnectedness of the ancient world. You might be getting a remedy that literally has a global footprint, a testament to the ancient Egyptians' willingness to incorporate effective treatments, no matter their origin. It makes you feel a connection to a much larger world, even as you simply try to breathe a little easier. As your cough slowly subsides, a testament to the ancient remedies, you begin to appreciate the remarkable continuity of some of these practices. The echoes of ancient Egyptian medicine, particularly concerning coughs, reverberate even into our modern world. A mainstream historical fact is that many of the basic principles of ancient Egyptian medicine, such as the use of honey as an antiseptic and soothing agent, or the reliance on certain herbs, have found their way into traditional medicine globally and are even supported by modern scientific understanding. Imagine sitting in your own home today, perhaps with a slight cough, and reaching for a jar of honey. You might stir it into hot tea with lemon, a classic remedy that feels remarkably similar to the ancient Egyptian practice of mixing honey with various soothing ingredients. You're inadvertently tapping into a lineage of healing that stretches back thousands of years. The Egyptians understood the power of simple, natural ingredients, and that knowledge, through various cultural transmissions, has endured. A quirky tidbit is that the use of willow bark, which we touched upon earlier, directly foreshadowed the discovery of aspirin. While the Egyptians didn't synthesize acetylsalicylic acid, their empirical observation of willow's effectiveness against pain and inflammation laid the groundwork. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of herbal remedies in modern alternative medicine directly stems from ancient practices like those in Egypt, or if similar effective plants were discovered independently across different cultures due to their inherent properties. It's a fascinating question of parallel evolution versus direct influence. Even the concept of hygiene and sanitation, while not fully understood in terms of germ theory, was a cornerstone of ancient Egyptian health practices. Their emphasis on cleanliness, while perhaps ritualistic in part, inadvertently contributed to disease prevention, a principle that remains central to modern public health. You might find yourself marveling at how some basic tenets of well-being are truly timeless, transcending millennia and technological advancements. So, as you feel that lingering tickle finally fade, remember that you've experienced not just an ancient cure, but a whisper of a medical legacy that continues to influence us today. As the echoes of ancient Egypt fade, and that stubborn cough is a distant memory, you can finally allow yourself to truly relax. The journey through their unique approach to healing has been a gentle one, a slow unwinding of historical threads. You've walked through dusty marketplaces, inhaled exotic aromas, and perhaps even winced at the thought of a lizard's blood remedy. But through it all, you've glimpsed a society deeply connected to its environment, resourceful in its treatments, and profoundly spiritual in its understanding of illness. The final lingering image is of a cool, quiet evening in the Nile Valley. The last rays of the sun paint the distant cliffs in hues of gold and rose. You imagine the soft rustle of papyrus reeds by the riverbank, a gentle breeze stirring the air, carrying away any lingering discomfort. Your breathing is slow, even, and effortless. The world outside your slumbering consciousness seems to quiet down, becoming softer, less demanding. There are no more ancient remedies to ponder, no more peculiar ingredients to consider. Just the soft, rhythmic hum of the universe and the comforting stillness of your own space. You are drifting now, a peaceful current pulling you gently into deeper tranquility. The stories of millennia past, of pharaohs and physicians, of honey and herbs, are dissolving, becoming indistinguishable from the quiet whispers of your own thoughts. Allow your body to sink deeper into the surface beneath you, feeling every muscle release its hold. The day's anxieties, the small worries, they are all floating away, like tiny boats on the wide, placid Nile. The world is soft, the world is quiet, and you are perfectly, wonderfully at peace.